It's the Philosophical Inquiry Show! And I am your host, Dr. Kovac. Well, those Malaysians, they're crazy, right? They get this whole project started of looking for a universal principle, what was called an arche. And that spirit of inquiry, that exciting, intellectually stimulating project, well, that spread like wildfire. It went everywhere. It went out of Asia Minor, it went into Greece. Soon, anybody who had the time and resources to do the philosophical scientific project that was now underway, everyone had to come up with their own ideas about the arche. And if you want to know about what happened immediately after that Malaysian project, well, you can take the class called Ancient Philosophy. We offer it here at Loyola Marymount University. There's a lot of characters along the journey, along the full story, who had interesting ideas about the arche. Like Pythagoras. You ever heard of Pythagoras? Have you ever heard of the Pythagorean Theorem? Remember, that's how you calculate the hypotenuse of a triangle, of a right triangle? Pythagoras probably did not invent or come up with that theorem. His school might have, but why is he remembered for it? Because Pythagoras and the little cult that he actually formed around himself, the Pythagoreans said that the universal principle, the arche, was number. They actually started to worship mathematics. Well, if you want to know more about the Pythagoreans and some of the other Malaysian pre-Socratics, like I said, take ancient philosophy class. Lots of fun stuff there. But let's move ahead a little and look at what happened to the question. The question was about universal explanation. The question was about the arche. And if you found that question a little confusing, what eventually happened in our story of science and philosophy, what eventually happened was these early scientific philosophers got some clarity on what the question was that they were trying to ask. The question became the question, why change? What is responsible for change? You can see how the Malaysian answers would fit as part of an answer to that. Why change? Well, everything's water and it's just water undergoing different changes. Or it's all air, and as air rarefies or becomes denser, thinner, it changes. Well, of course, there's all kinds of problems with those answers, and the ancients were well aware of those problems. So eventually the question gets reduced to just why change? What makes change possible? It's a huge question. It's a question you should think about a bit yourself. We know that there is change, but how is change possible? Where does it come from? Why is the universe just so full of change? As that question started to take off, what happened, as so often happens in the history of ideas, what happened was that two extreme polarized camps grew up. They're extremes. You cannot get any more extreme answers to the question, why change, than what these two schools came up with. The first school was headed by a guy called not Pythagoras. Why did I put that on the board? Stupid Kovac! The first guy we're going to talk about is Parmenides. Parmenides. What extreme position did Parmenides take on the question of change? Here it goes. He said, it's not real. Change is an illusion. Parmenides was what we would now call a monist, M-O-N-I-S-T, a monist. He thought that there's at most just one thing, one unchangeable, indivisible, partless reality. Change is just an illusion. He had a very complex argument, by the way, to make this point, that change is just an illusion. I'm not going to take you through all the parts of his argument. It is a complicated argument, and scholars actually have quite a bit of debate about how to best understand Parmenides' argument because we don't have the full text of what he wrote. We have little fragments of a long poem that Parmenides actually embedded his argument into. The argument might be said to go just a little bit like this. This is a very simplified version of Parmenides' argument that there is no change. What's past isn't real, right? The past isn't existing, and nor is the future. Only the now exists. Well, if only the now exists, well, then what is now? What is. That's a famous line from Parmenides. What is. What isn't. And from nothing comes nothing. Those three statements, what is, what isn't, and from nothing comes nothing. Well, given those three things, Parmenides says, change just turns out to be impossible. What's going to do the changing? What is, it just is. What isn't, it can't do anything. There just is. There's nothing to be responsible for change. Change just is. I'm sorry, there's nothing to be responsible for change because there is no change. There's just what is. What can change what is? What isn't? Surely not. So Parmenides' argument is complicated. I'm not going to ever quiz you on details about Parmenides' argument. You can look it up for yourself and see all the different versions of the argument that scholars think Parmenides was giving. But I will tell you about Parmenides' student, a guy called Zeno. Zeno tried to advance Parmenides' idea that there is no change. Zeno tried to do so using thought experiments. Zeno gave some thought experiments for us to think about, which he thought would illustrate the impossibility of change. Zeno was going to show that Parmenides was right by giving us real, concrete things to think about that will show us just how absurd we were to have thought change is real. How did Zeno do this? Zeno began by saying, how on earth am I ever going to get from LMU to Chipotle? I've got to get my Chipotle. It's delicious. I know. To get from LMU to Chipotle, first I shall go halfway from here to Chipotle. Yes, that's what I shall do. How am I ever going to get from here to halfway to Chipotle? First, I must go half of that way, a fourth of the way to Chipotle. Yes, that is how I shall move from here to Chipotle. Now, how do I get a fourth of the way there? I'll go half of it first. I'll go an eighth of the way to Chipotle. No problem. Now let me think. How will I get from here to 1/8 of the way to Chipotle? I know. I'll start by going 1/16 of the way. Before I do that, I got to do something else, do I? Before I can ever get 1/16 of the way to Chipotle, I'm going to have to first go 1/32 of the way. Now, if I'm going to go can you see where this is going? I'm going to have to go 1/64 of the way. No, I'm going to have to go 1/128 of the way, 1/256 of the way. It doesn't end. If I'm going to get anywhere, if I'm going to go even to the door, I have to get halfway to the door. First, I'll have to get a fourth of the way to the door. Well, no, first things first. 1/8 of the way to the door. What's that? Yes? Yes. I'm sorry. I meant to say that before I get to the door, I'll have to go 1/16 of the way to the door. I just realized I can't get anywhere. If I'm going to get anywhere, I have to go halfway there first. And half of that and half of that. Eventually, you can see I ain't moving. I ain't moving. This is one of Zeno's paradoxes to prove that Parmenides was right. That Parmenides was right, that what is, what isn't. And what can affect what is? Well, it's just what is. Another one of Zeno's paradoxes. A turtle and a rabbit go for a race. But the rabbit is so generous. The rabbit says to the turtle, "Turtle, get a head start on me." So the rabbit's back here, the turtle starts here. So they start racing. Well, guess what? By the time the turtle's By the time the rabbit gets to where the turtle was, the turtle's already moved again. Okay, so the rabbit just has to get to there. Well, then the turtle's moved again. How can the rabbit ever overcome the turtle? Every time the rabbit gets to a place where the turtle was, the turtle will have moved. The rabbit can never overcome the turtle. This is another one of Zeno's paradoxes to show that change is but an illusion. There's no reason to believe that Parmenides and Heraclitus ever met each other. In fact, they may have not even known of each other, but their students seem to have known of each other and to have debated. Heraclitus took the opposite position. Heraclitus said, yes, change is real. In fact, it's all that's real. It's all change. You want a universal principle, a universal explanation? Stop looking at water, aperon, air. It's change. Change is the universal principle, said Heraclitus. From the moment you're born, it's just change everywhere. And the physicists seem to have noticed this. You look at subatomic particles, they're just always buzzing and bouncing off each other. The universe, the material universe, appears to just be nothing but constant change. Heraclitus' famous quote from Heraclitus. You'll all remember this famous quote from Heraclitus. If you're ever at trivia night, and the question is, who said you cannot step in the same river twice? You hit the buzzer. You say, that was Heraclitus. Heraclitus said, you cannot step in the same river twice. Why not? Well, you step in the river, but if the river is just a particular collection of water molecules flowing constantly, by the time you put your next foot into the river, it's a different collection of molecules. And if it's different, it's not the same. And if the river just is a particular collection of molecules, well, then you're never stepping in the same river twice. Heraclitus saw all of reality like this. All of reality, thought Heraclitus, it's just change all the way down. This position might be called soft relativism. Soft relativism. Later, we're going to look at hard relativism. Soft relativism admits truth. There is truth. It's just, said Heraclitus, the truth is constantly in flux like a river. Truth is constantly changing, thought Heraclitus. People thought this was scandalous. They went to his student. Cratylus was the name of Heraclitus' student. Hey, Cratylus, is it true Heraclitus said you can't step in the same river twice because it's all change? Heraclitus said no statement is ever always true. Is that true, Cratylus? And you know what Cratylus did? He did this with his finger. He just wiggled his finger. Cratylus, we're asking you, is it true that Heraclitus taught that nothing is real but change? Why did Cratylus do that? Want to take a guess? I'll give you the answer. Here it comes. Cratylus figured, I know what the words meant this morning. Is it true that Heraclitus taught it's all change? But if it's all changing, well then even the meanings of those words, it's all changing, has changed. If even truth itself is subject to change, then what I knew to be true this morning, I have no reason to believe is true now. Thus, Cratylus could not even say the words yes or no, since the very meanings of the words yes and no are subject to flux. So we have here the two extreme positions on change. It's all illusion versus anything other than change is an illusion. Now, I wish to propose to you that these two philosophers have both offended us in very deep ways. Parmenides, I wish to suggest to you, is repugnant to the senses. the five senses: sight, touch, hearing, smelling, whatever. Parmenides' theory that change isn't real is just offensive to our senses. From the moment you're born, you're just hit with all this change, buzzing, blooming confusion all around you, nonstop. Everything you perceive with your senses is somehow changing. It's being changed in some way just by being perceived by your senses. This table used to not be seen by me, now it's being seen by me. And our physicists tell us that if I could look at the table close enough, I would see all these bouncing atoms. So Parmenides has offended my senses. Heraclitus has offended my intellect. How? Well, there's a problem with soft relativism, and you need to know what it is. Heraclitus said, in effect, no statement is universally true. I'll put it on the board. Soft relativism is the claim that no statement is universally true. That's the position of soft relativism. No statement is always true. Did you notice I put it in the mention marks? Let's talk about that statement. No statement is always true. Well, the first question I have about that statement is it always true? Because if it's not, why am I even bothering with soft relativism? And if it is, why am I even bothering with soft relativism? Soft relativism is one of those very few philosophical schools, very few philosophical theories that we've been able to pretty much just discard. Some statements just have to be true, full stop. This statement is self-defeating. If I ask you, why is soft relativism self-defeating? The answer is because the statement, no statement is always true, is either true or false. If it's false, then soft relativism is false. And if it's true, well then the statement comes out to be false. It's false. Either way, soft relativism has offended my intellect. Parmenides offended my senses, right? Parmenides said there's no such thing as change. Well, okay, Parmenides, then why do I see it, hear it, feel it non-stop? From the second I'm born, it never ends. Constant change. Even if you put me in the sensory deprivation tank, my thoughts come and go. They change. I'm never able to escape change. Why? Because of my senses. Change is constantly impinging on my senses. So, Parmenides can't satisfy the senses. Heraclitus is just fine for the senses. And yet, Heraclitus' claim offends the intellect. As soon as I try to think about it, as soon as I try to lay mental hold on Heraclitus' soft relativism, I lose it. I lose my ability to hold it just by thinking about it. You think about this statement and you realize I can't think it as true. Just like if you try to perceive an unchanging world, you can't. Try to think soft relativism, you can't. Try to perceive the Parmenidean monism, you can't. These two extreme positions on the problem of change, although well motivated, were unable, at the end of the day, to answer the questions, why change? The question was yet to be resolved.